Good evening and welcome to the Joko. Welcome to the Joko Collective channel. I am Brother Youssef, a poet, a professor of composition, creative writing, literature, a scholar of cultural studies, and particularly the Black arts movement in Los Angeles of the 1960s and 1970s, and even more specifically, Black Arts Theater in Los Angeles of that time. And again, I'd like to welcome you to the Joko. It isn't really a Joko conversation. It's me following through on the last video I did, picking back up with the Freedom Manifesto, wanting to continue to read from this document that, again, I discovered in my dear friend's home from 10 years ago, crafted 10 years ago, and I thought important to share. So I'm just reading directly from this manifesto put together collectively by community members 10 years ago, and calling for communities around the country to do the same, and to then meet in a national assembly to present the various manifestos and hash out something that the assembled can come to consensus on. Some revolutionary ideas here. So, welcome to the Joko. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whenever you may be watching this. We always start by acknowledging that we do this work in the tradition of, in the legacy of, and having received the baton from our ancestors, our personal African ancestors, our political ancestors, our spiritual ancestors, and we always acknowledge that we in the Joko specifically do this work in the unceded lands of the Tongva people of Southern California, that the area now called Southern California, in the Los Angeles basin and environs. So I'm picking up today with, as this recording is titled, the Freedom Manifesto, Chapter 2, Black History is the Fight for Freedom. In the previous recording, and about that previous recording, I'm not sure why the audio is so low. I think it was the microphone I'm using, and I'm hoping that I have made the proper fix, and the microphone that I'm using now is going to be more effective. But in that first Freedom Manifesto reading, I read the table of contents, and then read from the preface and the introduction, which was chapter 1, right? Chapter 1 is the introduction. And so now I'm picking up with chapter 2, which is one of the longer chapters, and going to share. Black history is the fight for freedom. The lessons of history are summations of a process. They can be about individuals or social groups. They can be local or global. This process includes social forces that represent different classes and nations. I'm reminded as I'm reading that opening to chapter 2 to platform the document. There we go. The lessons of history are summations of a process. They can be about individuals or social groups. They can be local or global. This process includes social forces that represent different classes and nations. It includes gender, sexuality, religion, generations, and so on. The main dynamic of the African American experience, the theme that embraces all Black people, is the fight not only to survive, but to resist and end capitalist exploitation and all forms of oppression. In a word, freedom. We have overcome the slave trade and colonialism in Africa and throughout the African diaspora. We have overcome sharecropping. We will overcome industrial wage slavery and today's inhuman forms of racism, poverty, and patriarchy. The system has been against us, but we have always fought back. Okay, now this chapter is divided into subchapters. And so I will begin, I'll read the subchapter first and we'll go forward. Africa. Africa was invaded by Europeans. There was evil cooperation from some of the ruling classes and elites among the Africans themselves. So Africa took a double blow. Black people were stolen from their land and forced into the labor systems of slavery in the West and colonized on African land. The people who remained in Africa were virtually enslaved. Both attacks forced European culture on African people, language, religion, legal systems, with little education that was provided and cultural aesthetics. The infamous colonization frenzy that was legalized in the Berlin Conference of 1884 through 1885. Let me read that sentence again. The infamous colonization frenzy was legalized in the Berlin Conference of 1884 through 1885. After World War II, African resistance movements expelled the invaders and created independent African countries. First came Ghana in 1957 under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah. Most of the newly independent countries were guided by a rising African capitalist class. This class compromised the liberation struggle by falling in line with the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Many African revolutionaries who represented the working class and struggles against capitalist neocolonialism were murdered. Patrice Lumumba, Chris Hani, Amilcar Cabral, Eduardo Mondlane, Pierre Mulele, General China, Kimathi, Stephen Biko, Maurice Bishop, Walter Rodney, and others. Today, Africa and the African diaspora face the need for a 21st century revolution led by the working class and its impoverished masses. The European slave trade. Stripping Africa of people served the labor needs of Europe, especially in the fields and mines of the Americas. As Eric Williams explains, a triangular trade linked Europe, manufactured goods, to Africa, labor, to the Americas, extraction of raw materials and products of agricultural development. This barbarism took Africans to every island in the Caribbean and every region of North, Central, and South America, expanding the African diaspora. Our freedom struggle has raged against these crimes, against humanity. We remember Queen Nzinga Mbande of Angola and Joseph Senku of the Amistad Revolt. The slave system. Slavery was a system that bred, sold, and worked Africans to death for 400 years. Millions of Black people were moved across the southern U.S. to produce tobacco, rice, and much more, most of all cotton. Black field hands were worked to death from can't see to can't see, from before sunrise to after sunset. Black women faced the double exploitation of working in the fields or the big house and breeding children to be slaves as well. Through inheritance and the long-lived corporations, the wealth we created still exists today. It keeps us in persistent poverty. Slave production of cotton pulled Black people into the Deep South, creating what became known as the Black Belt. But slavery's true role in the rise of capitalism has been kept hidden. It started in the 1700s with the buying and selling of African people and their production of cotton for the world market. It emerged as textile production in England and North America. By the 1800s, cotton was the #1 commodity in the world. The slave South and the industrial North each reaped the profits and benefits of slavery. Factories in the North produced cloth for clothing and other commodities. Ships leaving northern and southern ports moved slaves and goods around the world. Northern banks lent money to slave plantations and the industries that depended on slave-grown crops. Even the wages of white workers in northern factories depended on slave labor and profit from the world cotton trade. The market value of the nation's population of enslaved Africans was higher than all other sources of wealth at the time. These are the historical facts that continue to make reparations such an important question for the Black liberation movement. Emancipation. The U.S. evolved with two labor systems, slavery in the South and wage labor in the North. Representatives from each struggled for control of the federal government. This led to the Civil War. Slave labor threatened the wages of white workers. The abolitionist movement opposed the vicious system of slavery. All this motivated people in the North to support the war. But Black people were not given freedom by anybody. We rose up and fought in many ways to be our own liberators. Nat Turner, Denmark Vesey, Gabriel Prosser, and others led mighty revolts. The Underground Railroad, led by Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth, freed countless slaves. W.E.B. Du Bois, in his master work, Black Reconstruction, describes a general strike. Slaves withholding their labor and undercutting the slave regime in many ways. Black people fought the Confederacy at a far higher rate than white people. After the Civil War, during Reconstruction, Black voters and elected officials democratized the South, introducing free public education for all. The African American nation, especially within the Black Belt, a territory that stretches from the eastern shores of Maryland to East Texas, Black people created an African American national culture. Before and after the overthrow of slavery, Black people from different African origins were welded into an oppressed nation. We improvised on our original African cultures. We created new social institutions, a common economic life, new speech and language, and collective community life. We did this in church, in musical and other social and political venues, and in developing social classes. African Americans were concentrated in counties that were majority African American, dominated by the plantation economy, repressive government, and an apartheid system. We suffered concentrated exploitation and oppression. More people were lynched than More people were lynched there than anywhere else in the US. The lack of political authority over the territory and social and economic institutions of the Black Belt has prevented the Black majority in the South from expressing its full right of self-determination. And there, too, the modern civil rights movement developed. In opposition to the barbaric oppression imposed on Black people in the Black Belt, from peonage to lynching. The great migrations from the rural South to the industrial North. During the 20th century, Black people were pushed out of the South and pulled into the North, meaning the West, the Midwest, and the Northeast. This dispersed Black people into the major industrial cities. Racist terror pushed people north. Migration was also an act of resistance. People rejected old forms of oppression. In search of a better life, people in the rural South faced persistent poverty. The mechanical cotton picker eliminated their livelihood, and more often than not, the planter's tractor leveled their houses. Meanwhile, the northern factories beckoned. Urban ghettoization. Real estate redlining forced Black people into the city's worst housing. Our communities concentrated all of the worst social problems. Police control held it all in place, but Black people became the core of the working class. On that basis, building from our Southern roots, the urban ghetto became a major base of Black political power. Oppression breeds resistance. Mass organizations and movements brought together workers, students, community organizations, women, religious organizations, and many others into the 20th century fight for Black liberation. Crisis of permanent poverty. Capitalist globalization took new forms in the 1970s. Industries moved to former colonies and the US South. High unemployment became a permanent feature of the Black working class. Meanwhile, a technological revolution began to reorganize all of society. This reduces the demand for the labor of the old industrial system. Struggles of the 1930s and 1960s forced President Roosevelt's New Deal and Kennedy and Johnson's Great Society. But the social safety net has been framed for some time now. Let me reread that. But that social safety net has been framed for some time now. Permanent poverty is the lot of a growing section of the Black community. We are under assault by drugs, both legal and illegal. We face a new slavery in the prison system. This is all part of a general crisis of the capitalist system. The strategic role of the South. The majority of Black people have always lived in the southern region of the United States. This has also been the region of the most oppression against Black people. It continues to be the region most hostile to organizing workers with right-to-work anti-union laws. Increasingly, capital from all over the world joins U.S. capital in patterns of extreme economic exploitation in the South. But more than that, there's the structural patterns of racism and the lowest quality of life in all areas of human existence. The Southern region is a strategic location for the Black liberation movement, the workers' movement, and the general revolutionary forces because it is so crucial for the existence of the capitalist system. The social, economic, and political extremes of the region make the fight for reform an essential component to building a movement for fundamental social change. On the one hand, It is essential for the Black liberation movement's fight for African American self-determination, while at the same time advancing the role of Black workers in leading the movement. This class perspective strengthens the anti-capitalist character of the national Black liberation movement and is an essential part of fighting for the unity of the multinational working class. And that ends chapter 2 of the Freedom Manifesto. I'll be back with chapter 3. Our fight is against capitalism. I hope you found this edifying, useful, informative. The purpose is to get the word out, to share this, to share the ideas. So with that being said, please, if you have not done so, subscribe to our channel. Like this video. Please put a like on it. Help us with the algorithm. Help us be relevant on this YouTube platform. And by all means, share. This is worth sharing. This Freedom Manifesto, published in 2016, 10 years ago, by a group of brothers and sisters working together, looking toward a revolutionary program for Black liberation and the path to it. The moment is critical. Why not now? So with that, I will close until again when we get back to chapter 3 of the Freedom Manifesto. I am Brother Youssef. I thank you, and I will end, as I always end, quoting Bob Marley from the Natty Dread album, the song Revolution. Revelation reveals the truth. It takes a revolution to make a solution. Let's make a revolution, y'all. Good night. Good morning. Good afternoon.